Hey guys, this is Comic Uno and Comic Frontline, and today I'm doing Comic Uno episode 184. In this show, I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. So let's get started. We go worst pick of the week to best pick of the week, and I kind of have a shorter list for this week. So I only have 14 books I have to review, but let's get started here. So what was number 14? What was worst pick of the week? And that was America issue 1. I was pretty disappointed with this book because I've always wanted to get into America's character. I always feel like she's really interesting. A lot of people like her, but each time I try getting into her, I feel like there wasn't as much depth to her character as I wanted. And here, for me, the narrative was really jumpy, and that has to do with her dimension-type powers, but, you know, once I was hooked onto a story, we went on to another section of the story. So the narrative wasn't as linear as I thought it would be, and there wasn't really an emotional connection. I do think the best parts of the issue, though, was when America had, not the problem, but the argument with her girlfriend. I thought that was a really good scene, and the scene between Hawkeye and America, where we got to see their friendship, because that brought a bit of an emotional tie. It brought an anchor to the storyline. But then everything else kind of felt really jumpy, like I stated, and I just couldn't get into the story. So I don't know if I'll pick up issue 2, but we'll have to see when it comes out next month. So America issue 1 gets 2.5 stars. It just wasn't for me. But I will say, Gillen fans of Young Avengers, his run, I think you guys will enjoy this issue a bit more. Alright, so now we're moving on to number 13. Which is the Flinstones issue 9, which just was a boring issue to me. I mean, I get it. It was about layoffs of jobs, and they tried doing a lot of storylines, though, you know, with Fred's boss, and then also about the bowling ball being a person, you know, an animal. So I thought that was interesting. That was definitely the most fun, was the bowling ball story. But the rest was kind of boring and kind of felt repetitive of what we've been seeing with Flintstones. I just want a bit more of a character-driven story with this. So the Flintstones issue 9 gets 2.5 stars. Alright, now moving on to number 12, I've been disappointed with this series, even though I love this creative team, but Superpowers issue 5. I just feel like it's a bit too story-driven. I like it when it's just one-shots, you know, just jokes, and that's what Tiny Titans did, but here it's about Brainiac and all that. I feel like that's a little bit too much for the book what it is, and I personally just don't care about that side of the Superman mythos, so that's why I don't feel as connected to it. So Superpowers issue 5 gets 2.5 stars for me. Alright, moving on to number 11, which was hard to rate because I really liked the story, but I didn't like the artwork, and that was Grimm Fairy Tales issue 3. So with Grimm Fairy Tales, the story was really interesting because we got a connection from the past Grimm Fairy Tales story where Ali is like the head of these genies, and we got Jasmine in there, so it was cool. And then we had Samantha, who's like this Phoenix character. So seeing these characters back again was really interesting, and you know, Sky kind of just going along for the ride. But the artwork was really heavily inked that you couldn't really enjoy the scenes, and then even when they tried doing like a camera focus thing, it felt smudgy, so I didn't like the artwork at all. But the story was interesting, so that's why I did give it 3 stars, but the artwork really brought it down for me. So that was Grimm Fairy Tales issue 3. Alright, moving on to number 10, which is Green Lanterns issue 18, which is a one-shot learning more about the first Lantern. So if you wanted to learn more about the first Lantern, pick this up, but I felt like it was extremely exposition heavy. But why it's a bit higher is because the artwork was gorgeous. Some really nice heavy coloring here that just really made the great tone of this book. But the rest of the story, again, was very exposition heavy, kind of forgettable. But I guess it's going to obviously play a part in his relationships with the Guardians. So Green Lanterns issue 18 gets 3 stars. Alright. Moving on to number 9, which I gave a bigger review on my channel if you want a real in-depth review of this, but I'm just going to skim through it, and that is Clone Conspiracy Omega issue 1. I just felt like the whole story was kind of rushed, and the artwork was rushed too, and that was my biggest problem. Now, there's 3 stories, and I kind of felt that way with all of them, except the ending. I did the last story. I liked the one that was connecting to the Norman Osborn story. I liked the relationship Spider-Man had with Kingpin here. But the Ben Reilly thing, in the Ben Reilly story, I felt like he was still too villainous. Not villainous, but he was still too... I couldn't get into his character. I felt like I didn't have a connection to him. And he was so, you know, twirling your mustache type character, he didn't really have a lot of depth to himself. And then the first story, which was the big epilogue to the clone conspiracy, just felt crowded. There were so many stories they were trying to do that it left out that emotion they were trying to go for. So overall, I do think it's worth picking up if you're a Spider-Man fan, but I wasn't as impressed as I thought I would be for this epilogue. So the Clone Conspiracy in Mega issue 1 gets 3 stars. And it's a pricey price tag with $4.99. Alright, now moving on to number 8, another book I thought was going to be a bit higher in one of my comics dropped. Hold on. Another book I thought would be a lot higher, which is Batman issue 18. Which kind of feels a bit filler, which is weird. I think you're going to either love this issue or not and feel like it's filler, because it's that parallel, literally, of Bane growing up and Batman growing up. But it's a story I feel like we've seen a billion times already. So that's why I felt a bit bored. I'm like, alright, I get it. And then Bruce calling for his mom was kind of weird. I mean, he's like just kept talking to his mom, even though she wasn't there. I think that was definitely more of a Bane thing than a Bruce thing. I don't think Bruce would be calling out for his mom, even when he's like training and doing his martial arts, he's still calling out for his mom. Thought that was kind of weird. So this kind of feels like a filler though. It just like shows the parallel of the two characters, but I feel like that's kind of already known and we didn't need a whole issue to do that. So, but again, some people might really love that aspect of the book. I just felt like I've seen it before and I didn't really get much from it. So Batman issue 18 gets 3 stars. And that is number 9, I believe. No, that was number 8, and now we're moving on to number 7, which is Riverdale, issue 1. A lot higher than I expected, because I don't love the show, but I think this did a really good job at actually giving information that you don't have from the television show. So it's pretty much what our 4 main characters did during the summer Jason Blossom died. So you figure out what Archie did, what Betty, what Veronica, and what Jughead did during that time, and they gave us a bit of more information that we don't really get from the television show, and I actually got a better vibe of the actual comic books of Archie in this comic, probably because it's an Archie comic book compared to the television show. Now, did it make me a Riverdale fan? No, but it's still a fun book to read, even if it felt a bit lengthy if you're not a hardcore Riverdale fan. So I gave this issue 3.5 stars. Alright, now moving on to number 6, which is Hawkeye issue 4. I'm glad this arc is kind of over, because I was getting over with, oh, the town is being manipulated by this villain. But it gets really interesting by the end, where Kate finds out that her dad might have a relation to do with these villains that were taking over college students and the city. So I am really interested with that. I never felt like Kate and her father's relationship was fully fleshed out, even though I feel like it's really interesting. And just the Bishop family is really interesting, because she was a privileged character, and then she became this kind of Robin Hood type character. So I feel like they should definitely touch upon that, especially because Kate's character was introduced with her family. She was at a wedding for her sister. That is literally how she was introduced. So it'd be nice to kind of get into the crust of what that family dynamic's about. So I kind of like that slow burn they're using for this. So yeah, there are definitely slower parts because that was kind of over the arc, but it definitely picks up by the end of the issue. So Hawkeye issue 4 has some nice action, still a really fun series to read, and I'm excited to see where the series will go. Alright, now we're moving on to number 5, which is Superman issue 18. This probably would have been higher if it wasn't for the artwork. I don't really like the anime style for this story. I just don't feel like it fits Superman, but I like the story. It's a really good paced first chapter of Superman Reborn with the other Clark Kent, making the White family, which is the real Clark Kent and Lois Lane, have their home disappear in this blue fire, and then John disappear, which I thought they were going to get a bit more emotional about that, but I guess the next issue we'll see that. But it was a really well done paced story of building up who is this other Clark Kent, and it was a really good chapter. So Superman issue 18 gets 4 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, glad to see this a bit higher, and that is Silk issue 18. I felt like this went back to basics of why you should enjoy Silk, and if you did, goes back to therapy for Cindy, and also Cindy just dealing with the aftermath of the clone conspiracy, and you know, her relationship with J. Jonah, her relationship with her brother, her friends, and that's always where I feel like Silk is at its highest, when it's analyzing relationships that Cindy has, because that's so important to Cindy, being stuck in a bunker for 10 years. And now she's going to be moving on to S.H.I.E.L.D., so we'll see where that goes. I don't know if I love that direction, but I did like the pacing and the story that was presented in this issue. Even though I'm not like a huge fan of the art style, I do feel like the proportions are a bit off. I do like the cartoony art style for Silk, but I still enjoyed this issue. So Silk issue 18 gets 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, a big status quo change for Nightwing, and that is Nightwing issue 16. The artwork, there were times where facial expressions were a bit weird, and the coloring and inking felt a bit blotty. But looking over that, this was a really well done issue of Dick Grayson learning that he might be a father. So Dick Grayson learns about this, ready to go to his girlfriend, and his girlfriend gets kidnapped. Now, I don't love that she got kidnapped. It very much feels like this woman in refrigerator moment, but I hope we get a little bit of a twist in the end where, you know, she saves herself, because again, it feels like a woman in refrigerators moment at this point. But I do like the story. I was shocked that Nightwing might become a dad, and that brought in a really interesting dynamic between Damian and Dick Grayson. So I thought this was a really solid issue with, again, a big status quo change. So I gave that 4 stars. Now moving on to number 2, which is Motor Girl issue 4. Now, if you're not reading this book, you totally should. It's really psychological because it's dealing with Samantha's PTSD. And with this issue, you get to see a little bit of her time in being captured in war, being a prisoner of war, and how she's dealing with that. You know, this whole series is about how she dealt with that and is psychologically dealing with that. But also you have aliens, real aliens, even though Sam is hallucinating her best friend who's a monkey or a gorilla, and that's not real, but these aliens are. And then you get these little moments to really show her trauma that she's dealing with from war, like this guy who was one of the guys for hire, that he's just sitting on a rock because his friend was abducted by an alien, and we see Sam seeing that and thinking that he has a bomb on him because she goes in soldier mode. So it's those little moments that, you know, really get you into the character and bring this psychological narrative to life. So really well done issue and a good chapter of Motor Girl. So Motor Girl issue 4 gets 4 stars. Moving on to number 1, pick of the week, which is Paper Girls issue 12. I love this book. It's no surprise. I've stated how many times I love this book. So Paper Girls with this issue gives us a more evenly distributed narrative, because last issue is more just about KJ. Now it's pretty much about all the girls, but still more of a focus on KJ and Mac. So Tiffany and Erin are dealing with the cave woman who has a very similar narrative to Jesus and the Virgin Mary. So that brings us to the religious undertone. We get a little bit of a glance of the space woman and how she's connected to the cave woman and the cave men who are like the 3 wise men. So it's an interesting way that they're connecting technology and religion. But the most interesting of this story was definitely KJ and Mac, because obviously from learning about KJ, that her cousin died after drowning, she hasn't swam since, and so she goes into the water when she sees Mac go in, and she saves her, and this leaves her to having to do you know, to try saving her and trying to allow her to breathe again. So Mac feels that KJ is leaving her personal space, that she's evading her personal space. So interestingly enough, you get this really cool back and forth between KJ and Mac, and that either this is for a friendship they're building, or I see some romantic tension between them. We'll have to see as the story goes on. But you really do get a nice narrative between the two. And then in the end with KJ, because this is a coming-of-age story, we get to see KJ have her period. And Mac's like, congratulations! So we'll see how that plays out in the next story, because she's alone. You know, she doesn't have, like, her parents to tell her what to do. So it's a really interesting story that I think is a cool thing to bring into this coming-of-age story about 4 young girls. So I'm interested to see where they take KJ and Mac. I thought that was definitely the most interesting part of the story, but still having a really cool story with Erin and Tiffany, and widening this mystery of the world. So Paper Girls issue 12 gets 4.5 stars, and this is my pick of the week. Let me know in the comments below, what was your worst pick of the week, what was your best pick of the week, and everything in between. This is Comic You Know and Comic Frontline, and I will see you guys later. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to like my Facebook page. Also, description below, there are links for my comic book, Like Father, Like Daughter. And don't forget to like the Facebook page of Like Father, Like Daughter. And I do have the Kickstarter going on for Like Father, Like Daughter issue 4 for 3 more days. So if you'd like to go check that out, that'd be awesome. That'll also be annotated. So I'll see you guys later. Bye.